Hello and welcome to this Tuesday night live painting demo. Tonight I'm doing a painting of this young woman that I'm calling Poor Rabbit. And I think everything should technically, hopefully, drop off in hanging um, stream. And so I had to restart it at some point in the middle. Wasn't the first time. So I'm just going to jump right in here and get some of the drawing going. I As I explained in previous videos, I work site size, meaning that my resource is the exact size of the painting that I'm working on, and it's the same size in my field of view, so it's the same distance from me as um, as the panel that I'm working on. So, um, children are a little more difficult to paint than adults, usually because the 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 features are kind of scrunched up, tend to be a little bit tighter together and a little bit harder to judge. And so it takes a little bit of adjusting as you go to get everything sort of sitting in the right place. It's real easy to misjudge the distances between things because we kind of think of adult measurements, and what happens usually is like things like the mouth is much closer to the nose than an adult, or the eyes um, are closer to the base of the nose, and that's usually where we start to get it wrong. I'm going to start measuring some of these things as I go, so because I like to have everything be a certain distance from, and the that let me make sure the slider's all the way over. It's not even all the way over. Okay, so I really should have the eye over that far. I don't know how that is though. Let me just take a second measurement here, make sure everything is right. That's okay. The drawing was starting off so nice, but I really do have to get her over much further. It's fine. It's one thing you learn is that it's not a big deal to do something two or three times when you're working on a painting. Um, that's just how it goes, and if you're reluctant to do that, usually you end up with problems in the finished painting where you weren't um, willing to adjust things. Okay, but I have the head already drawn in. I can just follow some of what I've already put in. Okay, that still looks good. I see Jack's here. Hello, welcome, and Jill. Hi from Washington State. I think Jill, you were here last week or the week before, if I remember correctly. Okay, so this is a case where I'm probably not getting the distance of the eye right from the profile of her face. Let's get that measurement right from where the eye meets the hair. That's about where I want it. Corner of the eye. Um, Up. Yeah, this video on my end is hanging a little bit. You can let me know if you guys are having problems viewing the live feed. I just getting a um, spinning circle. I don't even want a spinning arrow, but hopefully it's not too bad on your guys' side. And maybe you can still hear me. I don't know, but I hope this isn't how it goes tonight. I got a new router, and it's been a little bit of a pain so far. The reason why we bought a new router is because we were having so many problems with the old one, but this one seems to be worse so far than the old one. Okay, let's see. You're saying everything's good. Okay, I don't know, just mine. Maybe if I refresh my screen on this end, I don't know. I really don't know what's going on. Oh, yeah. I just needed to refresh, I guess, to get the picture. Maybe that was some of my problems last week. I was relying too much on my the picture on YouTube as to whether you guys were seeing me or not, and you probably were seeing me, and I wasn't seeing me. Anyway, it gets a little complicated when I'm watching myself and you're watching me, and I'm also watching my phone, make sure everything's working. And I don't have an assistant, so it does make it a little hard. Tonight I'm using both my Gamsol, which is a solvent, very mild solvent, um, not as harsh as turpentine or not as toxic, low VOC, and it's an odorless mineral spirit. And then I also have safflower oil that I'm using my to my paints. Let me see if I can pull this back over so I can see where the shoulder comes to. So I think the way I want to approach this tonight is that I want her skin tones to be very smooth, but in relationship to the brush strokes of the rest of the painting, I want to be um, very thick and textural. So it's this idea of contrast that the smoothness or the very careful gradations in her face play against the more roughly painted areas of the rest of the painting, and maybe her hands too to make them fairly smoothly rendered. So if I'm looking at alignments here, the alignment of her face as it comes down, her hair, and then to her hand. That's actually very nice compositionally. It's a lot like what the Baroque painters would do. They would use these arabesquing curves, but they would make sure that everything lined up. One curve led into another, and this photo naturally does that, luckily. And so it allows me to make that compositional play. You see this one curve here, you see the other curve of the hand, the folds of the shirt, and that actually follows the curve of the doll also. If you look at the ear, how that lines up with the hand. So there's all these lines that are moving through, and I want to keep those alignments. Um, there also is a guidepost for the drawing to make sure that I'm keeping the alignments of the anatomy and the forms that are in the drawing. I don't know if that makes sense. Google Veronese and look at some of his paintings, and then start following the lines that you see in it, and you'll see all these arabesquing curves. Arabesque essentially means that they're curves um, that are in counter position to each other, where one curve goes one curves one way, there's a curve sort of serpentining in the opposite direction. This was uh, a what do you call it? A device that was used by many artists um, for going over hundreds of years. Something that even to modern day, a lot of artists still use some of those ideas, and it naturally leads the viewer's focus around the painting. It wasn't really started until after the Renaissance. The Renaissance was more focused on using um, this idea of symmetrical balance um, and lines of perspective. So everything was sort of was working to help accentuate the perspective. So if you think about the Last Supper, how every person in the painting is aligned with the perspective lines of the table, the ceiling, and the room. So I made her chin a little bit too long. I can feel it. Um, this is one of those places where um, you just have to keep on adjusting until it feels right. So her chin is actually coming out here and then cutting, and then it's coming a little more parallel to the bottom of the, or parallel, horizontal, and then it's the lines in her hair that are meeting the line in her chin. So I am going to play that up as much as I can. The locks in her hair that work around also to lead the eye around the form. Okay, and so her hair that's on her shoulder is really hiding the line of her shoulder. For good or for bad, her shoulder would be very square line, but we do have both this lock and then the next one that lead into the line of the shoulder. Let me make sure this measurement is good. Okay, you guys are a little bit on the quiet side tonight. That's okay. Um, but I haven't really been answering your questions either. Okay, Jill says yes, good memory. Neon Soul says you're good, meaning that technically everything's coming through. Jill, um, just fine over here. Good. James, are you using a glass palette? So yes, my palette box is a Ease L E S. See if I can remember how to spell it. EASLY. I think that's. I could be wrong, but anyway, it's a really nice product, and but it doesn't have glass on the bottom. It's just wood, and so I cut a piece of glass to fit the inside. I really like working on glass, and I like being able to scrape back to the bare glass once the paints have dried on it, or even before they've dried. Ideally, before it dries, it's a lot easier to scrape, obviously, and to keep it clean if you do it after each painting session. So her hand just extended, and it's a little bit distorted. We're getting kind of at that far edge of the lens there, so the camera is a little bit close to her in that spot. So, but the distortion on her face altogether isn't so bad. Let's see if I can double check that measurement. The top of her forehead where it meets the hair is good. I think the top of her head is a little bit lower here though. I'm just using, I don't know if any of you use Gamblin paints, but they make a color called Toric Gray. And Toric Gray is just when they clean their mixers and everything, and they take all the paints that have been mixed together and they make a gray out of it. It just has every color that they make in there, and and it makes kind of a nice warm gray. But I'm just using it as kind of a under drawing color tonight. Just gonna keep on drawing until I feel pretty confident that the drawing is pretty close to where I want it to be. At some point I do have to come in with some color to just clean up all my drawing lines and so that I can see a little bit better. So this distance I have a little bit tight, but that's okay. I think let's measure from here to the bottom of her lip. Not too bad. And then I get to the base of her nose. And again. Okay, I think we might be up again. Sorry. Yep. Sorry, I lost a bunch of you, I think, in that last bit that got frozen here. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, I really have to reassess all my equipment and figure out what's going on here because it is rather painful to do these live streams and drop out every 5 to 10 minutes. At some point, that becomes not worth it to do it. So, made the bridge of her nose just a little bit too thick. So let's see if I can get back a little bit the delicateness of her nose. I think when I refresh the screen, I lost my chat. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, okay, so there says there's 7 people here, so maybe I didn't lose so many people as I thought. It just said that there was 2. Um, YouTube was lying to me. So I think I have the eye a little bit too low here, which is okay. Okay, so let me get a bigger brush because I'm just hurting myself here. I really need to cover some wider area. And I need to buy some newer brushes. Mine are getting pretty beat up here. And and I have cans of brushes, so when I mean cans, like old bean cans, I just stick all the old brushes into. I just stand them up. And so I probably should go through those and reclaim some ones that are still in pretty good shape. So I'm just gonna get some paint down and obliterate some of these drawing lines that are a little bit confusing. Okay, my technical difficulty here. I'm still kind of a newcomer when it comes to YouTube, I guess. There's some old pros out there that know how to make everything work seamlessly. So one thing that I like to do is to get enough information down so that I can see where I am in the painting, to have enough landmarks that I can then start to compare it to the photograph. And sometimes that takes a while to get to that point where there's enough things in place that you can then judge where you are. And then a lot of measuring. I'll probably do a lot more measuring before the night's over. And let's pull the tip of her nose up a little bit. I have that nice dark that's underneath her nose. It's very thin and subtle in the photo. Let's pull her cheek out. Okay. Starting to get some of the shapes working. And I think getting her mouth in. So for the mouth, I'm using a very highly tinted quinacridone red and with a little bit of naphthol red in it. I have a warm red and a cool red. They both have very high tinting strength. When I say tinting strength is you can add a lot of white to it and it still maintains a fair amount of color. I'm just trying to get the general shape of the lips at first. And I need a lot more yellow and orange in her chin. That lower part of the face will be a little bit yet more yellow and green than other parts of the face. The cheeks will have more red in it, obviously, and the forehead will tend to be a little more orange. Let me see. I am frozen on my screen, so oh, yeah, sort of frozen. Seems to be okay now. So, Rovon W, I'm not trying to pronounce that. I assume you use site to size method to get proportions. Yeah, I will do some measuring and checking, but also as I get towards the end of the painting, I can really use it to um, hone in on where the the drawing has gotten off. If I really can't see it that well, sometimes I will take a photo and bring it into Photoshop and lay it right over the original photo, the painting over the photo, and I will sort of toggle back and forth, and that really shows me quite clearly where the drawing had gotten away from me. Sometimes I don't want to match the photo perfectly. It's fine if there's some discrepancy there, but where I'm having problems with the anatomy and the feeling of the angle and the gesture of the face, sometimes it's helpful just to do that. The other technique I use is to look into a mirror or hold a mirror up to my face and look back at the painting, and that really helps very quickly see where drawing errors are. And let me get redraw sort of the general shape of the eye, because I think it's confusing me a little bit. It didn't look like they were pointing in the right direction. She is looking down. Center line of the eye is like here. Okay, Alice is here from Melbourne. Welcome. So I guess it's fairly, maybe it's midday or it's still morning there. I'm not sure. I would ask Siri if I wasn't streaming with my phone. I think I did check once when my video was starting. It was, I want to say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Sydney. Um, okay, maybe not. Yeah, that sounds about right if it's 1:30 in Melbourne. Okay, so now I want to start thinking about things like the face in dimension. So I can think about this part of the chin facing this way, and that curves around, and then it faces towards us right around here underneath, but it's curving under. That's why I need to get darker. Need to, and change of color here will help us see it as being kind of being pulled underneath. And then making that a subtle gradation here will help with the help the eye kind of see it as turning in space. Helps if I get kind of the gradation softens up into the cheeks and then gets much rosier. So let's get a little bit of that reddish color in there. And under part of the chin. Now, I made her chin a little bit too fat, so I can actually then cut into it a little bit more and then go darker. And then her neck is going to have the shadow from cast shadow from blocking the light there. And generally you want to paint the neck in this kind of situation where you have lighting from above. You want to paint it a couple steps darker generally than the rest of the face, so you can feel the face coming forward. Even if it doesn't look like it, in this case it is, like these lighter lights in her neck aren't as light as the lighter lights in on her cheeks, for example. And then the forehead is going to go a little bit darker in this case too. So I'm still trying to keep it very general. I don't want to get too much down into the weeds right now. I'm just sort of feeling out. What's a good mix for yellowish skin? Hmm. Um, so I'm one that I tend to underplay yellow. I often look back at my paintings and they're far cooler than the resource because I tend to be a little bit shy about yellow. I use all colors in my skin tone. Blues to pull out to help. That helps give a greater sense of life and realism to the painting. Um, when I see painters that only use a very narrow band of colors for their faces, to me that usually looks like they've been under a tanning lamp for too long. It really does need all those complementary colors in the flesh tones to make it feel like it's the person's alive and healthy. Okay, I do need to step back a second and get a little bit smaller brush going to kind of get some of these, the shape of her nostrils, for example. And usually in the crease of the nose, I like to go a little bit redder. And if you look closely in the photo resource, usually there is quite a bit of red in some of these spots underneath the nose and inside the nostrils. And then I want to pick out where her lip, the edge of her lip here, right here, because beyond that you're really seeing the cheek and you're getting some light bouncing off that. And I'm getting some light on the kind of a halo around the bottom of the nose. Let's see if I can get a little more white in there to be a little bit more, what's the word? Well, often when I paint, I'll lose words because I'm so much in sort of a visual frame of mind. I guess a little more emphatic with the color is what I was looking for. This is going to be a little bit of a challenge here. That nostril has to come up just a bit higher. So it's just fine tuning as I go. And then it gets a little bit softer underneath here. And then I need that dark underneath. A little bit of purple, a little bit of black. Okay, and so I'm just looking back and forth and comparing so that I don't get too far off. I'm not going to get it perfect right off the bat, and sometimes it works not being perfect. So sometimes you just leave it and come back and see if it's working, then you just make a decision to leave it, um, feel like whatever the strokes were in the painting as opposed to trying to match the photograph perfectly. So this is a tough angle for her iris. It's she's looking down and I see the pupil there, and then there's a little bit of orange or some color like that in her eye color. I can go pretty light there. I don't want to get too light because then it won't look natural, but I want the pupil to read right there, something like that. And then I have the lower lid cutting across here. Okay, so that's going to give me the placement of the eye. Uh, okay. Well, I'm having really a lot of problems with my internet service tonight. Okay, so Alice asks, how do you go with doing fine lines and adding more color to your painting when you're already got heaps of oil down pat, so everything just blends? When I paint, I have to in sessions to avoid this. So what you're talking about is you're letting the paint dry before you can come back in with more paint. I tend to keep my paints rather thin in the beginning so that I don't have to overcome so much paint underneath. And then you can actually get quite a bit of detail on top even with thick paint, because if you paint thick over thinner paint, then especially with soft brushes, you can get the paint to sit right on top of the thinner paint. And it just sort of takes a little practice to kind of get the feel of it, um, and know when you have too much paint down. Sometimes you can just come back and take scrape some of it off or take a little bit of it off so that it's not so thick. Um, I don't have to do that so often though. Really want to make this a lot more subtle here, this dark where her eyebrow comes into the line of the nose. That's just much lighter red. And I have to work a little bit on the perspective of the eye. It's just off a little bit. Her eyelid comes much more straight across. So just continuing to adjust those things until they look right. Let's get that pupil a little higher, and then her eyelid actually comes up higher in her brow. I think I feel like I should measure this. So that's about the right spot. I just have to keep on working back and forth until I have the angle of her eye feeling right. And then I have the top of her nose has a lot of white in it. The light is pretty hot on this spot here, and I can start to get, and I guess that's the other thing is I like to get really thick where the lightest lights are. Just let um, fair amount of textured white paint to sit, um, and a lot of times you can get it to feel just like a highlight on the skin if it's just sitting um, on top of the other paints. So I can get like a highlight on her nose right here by just getting white. And I think I have to be a little bit darker around that so you can see the light, the paint sitting on top, something like that. I don't think I have some of her flesh tones quite dark enough yet for those things to work. But if you look at her flesh tones in this, her her features are very soft. It doesn't look very shiny, her skin. It just looks extremely soft. And so I'm not going to go crazy with the highlights. I don't need her looking wet um, or shiny, really. I just want her to look very soft. Let's indicate where the split in her lips are, just so I can see it. And then her top lip comes around quite a bit more. That might be just a little bit higher. And then the corner of her mouth is pulled pretty tight. Her mouth, she isn't pulling her mouth very wide, it's just more kind of pulled into her face a little bit. So she's just, it's kind of pushed against her cheek here, sort of accentuating the roundness of her cheeks. So I do want to get that tension that's in there because that's really going to make her cheeks feel really full. And then I have to pull back the corner of her nose just a little bit. I can see that the drawing is off there. So, but I do want to feel the roundness in her cheek there. So every little bit of detail that I can find that's going to um, tell the story of the roundness of the cheeks, I'm gonna work it. So this crease of her cheek along here, even though it's very subtle, um, I'm just going to make it a little bit darker than I see in the photo, so that the eye has a chance to start to move around in space here, and then get lighter around here. So I really want to get sort of that round contours working. And then the corner of her mouth, I can see the far corner is actually up here. It's actually coming around. It's very, very subtle. I want to make sure I get the angle of her mouth right too. And the philtrum that's coming down, that's the grooves in the middle of the lips. And there's a little bit of shadow that's coming down in there. So something like that. Just going to add a bit of red that's underneath the eye here. That's a lot more color than's really there, but that's fine. That'll get knocked down as I work. Let's get another measurement. Just make sure that the slider is over all the way. Okay. That's not too bad. That's pretty good. Okay, and I just need to go dark where the hair is behind her forehead. So I need to see that line pretty well. The cheek is set back a little bit from the line of the forehead, comes down, and it turns right about where the nose is, and then comes in rather sharply towards the mouth. Really have to pay attention to that contour. I think I spend more time painting the contour of cheeks than about anything else in a painting, because just really getting the placement right is really hard. I have her lower lip pulled back a little bit too far. I don't mind the expression, but um, I just want it to feel a little bit closer to what's going on there. That means I need a little bit of this cheek showing here. So already I'm adjusting. Okay. And then you can see here her hair underneath her chin is coming up from a little bit higher. And her nose is coming out just a little bit further than I have it. Something like that. Let's straighten this out a little bit, this pink color. Okay, so though some technical difficulty, nothing critical yet, so I'm keeping my brushes crossed. Okay, she's looking a little bit Rubenesque right now, just because of the amount of outlines I have on things and how pale her flesh is. Okay, I can pull her nostril forward just a little bit more. Okay. And let's see if I can get the placement of her other eye. The lashes are coming up around there. I can see her pupil right about there. Her lower lid pulling back. Okay, and now I'm going to put in where her hair is cutting into her face a little bit. Let's see if I can get an approximation of the hair color. So a lot of red here, but then it gets very yellow in spots. This comes down right over the eye, and then there's the rest. And then I've given her too much chin there. Let's see if I can get the value structure in her face a little bit better. And then her face will seem a lot more dimensional as I get some of that right. Oops, that's not the color I wanted. Just a little more red underneath here. Okay, and I I do need to reach over to the yellows and the oranges a little bit more because she's going to get get a little bit too cold otherwise. I mean the color, the overall hue will be too bluish. Okay, and again I can do some indication of where the edges of her cheeks are to make them feel very full. And I'm going to get some almost pure white along her profile here because she has some light reflecting back into her chin there against the very dark colors of her hair. Okay, and just kind of carve a little bit more off her cheek if I can get the right color. Not too much. That's a little bit too much. So I'm going to just come back a little bit. That's pretty good. Okay. Want to get a little bit of the bulge of her eye. It's not a straight line there. There's a little bit of contour that hints at the underlying anatomy. Okay, so I'm starting to get that kind of soft fleshiness that I wanted, um, in contrast to the much thicker paint that I'm going to have around her head and in her clothing. So this is a good start for that. Let's lighten this up a little bit. Okay, and adjust her jawline a little. And she has a little bit of reflected light underneath her chin. That's going to help define where the edge of her chin is. That's going to be like a light orange color. I don't want to go too light, just enough so that you can see it against the darker shadows. Okay, and then I need the line of her hair against her neck. That's going to be right. If I look, it's right here. So it looks like I have to have her chin out just a little bit further, which is okay. Actually, I'm going to move that line of her chin up just a little bit. Bring that shadow up higher. Okay, I've been using this small brush for a little bit too long there. And freshness is starting to suffer a little bit because of it. Okay, that's better. So I hope you guys are starting to feel the 3D sense, the dimensionality of the form. Just there should be enough transition of values to start to feel the form coming out, and paying attention to the contours and the anatomy does help in that regard. Okay, get some of the darks going. So I can work pretty thinly here. I have some nice transparent darks as long as there's not too much white in the paint. That'll work to get pretty dark. And I do want to get the sense of light, the light reflecting off her hair, so I need to get pretty dark around the edges there. And then her hair more or less bleeds off into the background. So I'm going to go through a whole tube of black probably on this background here. Okay, and then just sort of the approximate color of her hair in this part of her head. I can go back and refine the colors more later. So I'm not going to be able to get a rich black right off the bat, not easily. I can come in very thick with the black paint, but that would just be pretty messy because the paint is so transparent. To get a rich black right off the bat, I would have to come in so thick, and then the end it would just kind of leave a nasty piles of paint on the panel. And I really do want to keep it rather thin so that I can keep that black nice and flat and glazed. Look at a little bit of purples and violets in the shadow here. I don't want it to be just go into black. There's lots of color there in the shadow. So I'm using just about every color I have in the palette in her hair. Not a lot of blue, but tons of purple, lots of yellow. There may be some spots of green. You know, if I want that sort of golden reflections to work, I really need to have the complementary colors holding it up. Okay. My reception is so bad here. I'm just hoping that you guys are getting a decent feed. Okay, get that little bit of wisp of hair. I don't have to get it perfect yet. I can redraw it if I have to. Okay. So you learn after a while that oil paint can be very forgiving if you don't get obsessed about messing up things that are already painted. You can do all kinds of things, move things around. Um, let's get a little bit of, see if I get the right red in there. A little bit of a cool pinkish color there. That may be a little bit too cool, but that's the color that I'm seeing. That's too dark. Okay. Okay, see if I still need to work on the shape of her lips a little bit. They're still not quite right. And I can see the other corner of her mouth it's pulled in a little. Let's throw a little highlight in there on her lips so I can start to see the shape of that form there. Let's be a little more emphatic with the space in her lips there. And a little bit darker on the outer edge. That's going to help turn the form. Okay, again, using too small a brush, but that's okay. Okay, and I'm going to put in a little bit of indication of where her, the crease in her lower eyelid. This is kind of an important feature. It really does tell us um, where the eye is. And the bottom part of the eyelid tells us how wide open her eye is. I'm just kind of seeing some of that. You just have to look really closely. And then I have to pull the top of the eyelid down a little bit. She is really looking down. And then there's just a little bit of indication on the edge of um, her iris where the white of the eye is. It's a little hard to figure out what that color should be, but kind of a pinkish. Something like that. We're getting there. Okay. There's a bunch of things that are just a little bit off, but I'm going to keep on moving. Make sure that I use the time well. And I can always come back later and adjust some of these things. I pull the bottom of her nose up a little bit. And the color of her hair and her eyebrow is just like this golden orange brown color. It's really a hard color to mix. And then she has some pink coming in underneath that's very close in color, but just a shade lighter. And you need to be able to have control over the values where there's such subtlety so that um, you're able to describe them accurately to get the sense of the form, again, the form and the anatomy. But without that control over values, it would be really hard. Okay, and I can see that she has a lot more cheek here than I gave her. Yeah, occasionally I'll do a self-portrait. Alice asked, do I ever paint myself? Um, there is one that's on my Instagram page, probably somewhere towards the middle, that I did last year. And I think I've used it as a profile picture in a couple places. Um, on maybe my YouTube channel. No, I may have changed it. Um, I think it came out pretty good, very expressive. Okay, I think I'm gonna pull her eyelid back just a little. So I keep on adjusting as I go. I think it's the only way I can get there. I'm not one of those people that gets it right the first time too often, so I'm just used to working back and forth until everything falls where it needs to go. Okay, and then I'm going to shave her nose a little. That sounds terrible, but it's a little bit better. Eventually starting to get there. This is really the focus of the painting right here, besides the rabbit. Really want the tip of her nose to be where the eye goes. And kind of starting to get a little bit more the structural sense of the face slowly. It's taking me a while to get kind of the feel of where her forehead is. Moved it back and forth a few times. Okay, let me see if I can get a little more black down where her hair is. Um, there's just a little bit of the indication of the top of her head there, but then I want this to sort of be that subtle gradation that describes her. The light hitting the locks of her hair right here. Let's get a little bit redder. Oh, I don't know how I got a big um, glob of green right there. That's not the color I wanted. So I may have to wipe that out to clean it up because it's going to contaminate all the other colors. I think I got enough of it cleaned out. Let's see. Lost a little bit of her lips there, but that's okay. Okay, that didn't hurt me too badly. That's the trouble when you have the green sitting too close to your black. I have to think about that one again before I lay out my palette. I can see the ear through the hair. It's going to be roughly here. And then her earlobe is up pretty high because her head's tilted forward. Let's get the top of the ear up a little higher then. Okay, let's get those highlights moving in there. See if you really pay attention to some of the forms in the hair, then you can really start to see that moving around the face. Oh, Alice, Dane says, I always admire your painting. You're awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, we're about an hour and a half in. Hopefully I'll get to the hands soon. I'm just going to indicate some of the shirt, get a little more the feel of the hair in. I think we have the face good enough for now. I just want to get the feeling of the highlights in the hair. Just get some of the little strands that are catching the light. I think that's going to help. actually starting to run out of black on my palette. I'm going to have to put a little more out soon. So the black I use is a chromatic black. It's a Gamblin product. Um, Pretty soon they're going to have to start paying me a little bit for promoting their product so much. And it's a mixture of quinacridone red and phthalo emerald. And they're perfect complements. When you mix them in the right proportion to each other, then they completely cancel each other out and make a very nice, transparent, rich, transparent black. And they have a slightly different quality than like an ivory black is semi-opaque and tends to be much more tar-like. And this black is very thin, transparent, shiny. Um, doesn't cover very easily. You can see up here all the strokes, but if you come back in with enough layers and the right viscosity, then you can do a pretty good job of getting it um, to black, a very dark black, especially if you are good about keeping white contamination out of the color. Let's see if I can get that little bit of hair that's sort of yellow and white and orange together. That's pretty good. Just leave it at that for now. I'm using a lot of purple in her hair. This dioxazine purple, it's a very strong purple, but if you're painting it dark enough with a little bit of black, then it isn't overwhelming. Okay, let's see. I want to get just some of the shirt color blocked in, and then I'm going to get to her hands. And the value of her hands are very dark in relationship to her hair, to her face rather. So I need to be mindful of that as I start to work on them, that I don't start painting them too light. So you really want the sense that the light is dropping off as you're moving down the painting. And that's going to bring a little more drama to her face and to the doll in a way that it's sort of slowly moving off into the shadow. Okay, I'm going to mix a fair amount of the color of her shirt so I can move pretty quickly in this. Don't have to get all of the color variation, the value variation off the bat. I can start to vary it once I get it down. Then I'm going to mix a little bit of the shadow side of her shirt color, something like that. I can see a little bit where I photoshopped a little more photo. I wanted to move her a little bit over into the picture, so I photoshopped some more picture in and used things like what is that called, where it adds content. I can't even remember what it's called. It's called see if I can find it, content aware, where you add to your picture and you use this filter called content aware, and it takes the information that's in the existing part of the photo and guesses what the other part of the photo would look like. And it's not magic in a way. It can only do so much, but where something is continuing on from one part of the picture to another, it's pretty good at guessing what is going on in the picture to put to continue those things on. Okay. The eyeball of the doll is going to be very important, so I want to make sure that I'm paying enough attention to it. It has that little bit of reflection on it. I'm just going to move it a little bit. So I can just paint that in right now. It's pretty easy. It's just a dark round shape, and then has a highlight right there. Let's make it a little more descript. Yep, just like that. And then the fur does get a little bit of a highlight on the lower edge there. Get a little bit of purples going in here. It's kind of got this weird shape that's coming up. I may end up losing that if it does. I find it too distracting. And I'm just sort of scumbling a little bit. Maybe that'll help me get some of that fur kind of texture. Otherwise, I'm going to use a bristle brush and get some longer brush strokes going to get the sense of the fur moving around. Oh, poor rabbit. With his big floppy ears. Okay, and I got her striped magenta pants there. So just indicate it for right now, just to kind of get an idea of it. Purple and magenta stripes. I want a pair of pants like that to wear to work. Okay. So then I have her blouse sleeve. It's in shadow and it's picking up quite a bit of red. And a little bit of purple as it drops off into shadow. Okay, then I'm going to paint in the shape of her hand. Get a little out of orange, and I need it to get fairly dark. Need to be orange, but not too bright, kind of on the grayer side. Okay, I'm just trying to get this the larger general shape of the hand to start off with. Then later I can worry about getting the fingers and stuff like that in the right place. But it's going to be a lot easier if I've already gotten the general silhouette of the hand right. Let's get that measurement here from the all the way at the bottom there. The top of the hand. That looks about right. Okay. Now I'm being very liberal with the amount of paint that I'm using. I have a lot of panel to cover, and um, I can't be too timid with the paint here, or I'll take forever. But there's no need. I can just um, black in large shapes. I've got a pretty good sense of where things are falling now in the painting. So as I see a color, I can mix it and then put it down. Okay, you guys still with me here? Okay, good. Yep. I don't know how Bob Ross did it talking the whole time, but I get kind of quiet at times as I'm really starting to concentrate. Okay, need dark shadow off the back edge of the hand. And that gets back to our doll. That's the perfect same color as my torrid gray, fortunately. So I have lots of paint to get that color. sure I get his foot over far enough. Oh, sorry. Get a little yawn going there. Okay, hope you guys aren't completely asleep now. Just have the YouTube going. I see there's 9 people. That doesn't mean there's 9 awake people. And I don't think YouTube can tell whether you're awake or not, so they just count you. Well, Jill, it's 3 hours earlier where you are. I I had, I think at least a couple times. I've done about 50 of these, well, maybe 40 of these live demos now, and there's been a couple of them where I feel like I've started to fall asleep in the middle of a brushstroke, and hoping no one picked up on it. And that's usually when I go, well, I think I'm about as far as I can get to tonight, and then I call it a night. But um, still have a little bit of stamina going here, so I think I can keep on going for a little while. But the thing is starting to pull together. I can start to see where this is going now. So I want to knock out some of that, this corner, so the white isn't so distracting. Get a bigger brush to do that though. This one, nice big bristle flat with a loose handle. Get a little bit of magenta in the paint there, just the alizarin permanent, just to give it a little more richness. Color, not just straight black. Even a little bit of purple. So sometimes I'll mix a little bit of, trying to think of what it's called. Um, it's a Gamvar. It's a little bit of, it's not Gamvar. It's, what is the medium called? Um, I'll pull some out and then I can tell you. Um, it's Galkid is what it's called. And sometimes I want the darks in the painting to be shiny, like not, um, to sort of keep their richness of when they're wet. So I'll mix some Galkid in with the paint, and that will help it, have a little bit of a sheen, even after it dries. And um, so you got to be careful with that because you can have, weird shiny spots against weird flat spots in your painting if you're not careful with it. Um, and there's times where I've used it in the background and in the hair, and sometimes that doesn't look quite right. So sometimes it's best if you're going to use it in the darks, just in the shadows and not in like some of the areas of the hair or the flesh where they go into shadow, because then you get that weird reflectiveness going on. And depending on the light source in the room where the painting is hanging, it can kind of look strange. Okay, that's starting to look a little bit better. Let me see. Indranil asked, "Wow, what color and brush are you using?" Brand name. I think this brush is a Pro Stroke brush. I got it off of, I don't know if it was Dick Blick or Jerry's Artorama. It's sort of one of the generic brands of the two, but I don't remember, and it's pretty well covered with paint now. Um, so I can't be sure that's what it is. It could be a Princeton brush or something like that. Um, it's whatever the ones that have these red tips. Oh, Pro Stroke. Here it is. Pro Stroke Creative Mark, and I think Jerry's sells those. I'm not 100% certain. And the color that I'm using is I have dioxazine purple, some quinacridone red, and chromatic black, all very transparent. Um, so I'm working kind of glazing to get the background eventually darker, as it needs to go pretty dark to for these highlights in the hair to pop right. It's okay if there's little bits of little rivers of light in the background. That texture always adds a little bit of something to the painting. I think I've cut off the back of her head just a little bit too much, so I'm going to come back with a little bit of light back there. And I want her ear just to sit back a little bit more. So I'm just going to knock that back a little. Okay, so if I'm going to get the painting to where I want it to, I need a lot more thicker paint in her blouse and in the doll. And then I want the hands to be kind of like the face, sort of starting to get a little bit smoother and rendered out. And that's going to take a while. So I'm 2 hours in. I think I might paint for about a half hour more. I don't think I'm going to finish the painting tonight, but I'm going to get it pretty far along. Good start. And then I'll be able to finish it in the next night or two. I am working on another painting now, a commission that there is no real time limit on it. And so I've just been working on it at my leisure. I am running a sale in my Etsy shop that ends in an hour. I don't know if anyone's going to take me up on it. Um, I could probably bring it up to see, but it's a Valentine's Day portrait commission. What do you call it? Custom portrait sale, because the sale is basically ends now because that will give me enough time to finish the painting and get it delivered to whoever buys it. But I don't think anyone's taken me up on the sale at the moment. I ran some similar sale for Christmas, and I did get quite a few takers for that one, but there's just always more shoppers at Christmas than at Valentine's Day, so kind of expected that I may not get any bites on that, but that's okay. Sometimes, right now, I'm sort of grateful that I don't have quite so many commissions. That way I can do these kind of paintings where I can just paint on them just the way I want, and I'm the only one that has to care about it. Um, I can decide to make it as loose and as spontaneous as I want, Sometimes when I'm working on commission, it does lose that spontaneity because I'm really focused on the getting the likeness. That may take a lot of back and forth before I get there, and it may lose a little bit of that the looseness of it. Okay, let me see if I can get that highlight on her cheek a little bit better. Kind of messed that up, but that's okay. Getting the shape, starting to get the shape of the nose. It's been a little bit of a struggle. Okay. Face is pretty good. Something funny going on with the hair up here, but so I didn't give her enough head, essentially, to support um, the forehead that I gave her. That maybe can end a little bit lower here. Okay, let's see if I can get that little bit of sense of smile that she has. That's, like I said, you can see the corner of her mouth right here. a little bit of yellow in the paint here so the whites don't make her face too cold. Okay, let me see if I can get the hands working at this point. Because all the other stuff I can paint pretty, can take my time on and get it to look right. Like I said, I'll probably come in much thicker with that stuff. Okay, let's see if I can, what's really hard is getting fingertips in perspective because they want to go in a direction that usually is hard to render, especially like if a fingertip is moving away from you. See how specific the shape is of the fingernail. There, it's a little bit getting in the right direction. Okay, and make sure that I have the rest at the right angle here. And finally, there's a spot where for a little bit of blue here, right, in the reflection on the back of the knuckle. Okay, let's get the shape of the thumb right so that it does read. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. Mm-hmm. Okay, Jack, have a good night. Um, so Taga says, yay, I can kind of see the palette this time. Yes, I did point the camera down a little bit so that you could see it. Okay, gotta make sure I'm staying dark enough on the top of the hand here. It's really easy to get too light with the darks and too darks with the lights. I think that's where people kind of say their paintings look muddy, and I don't think it's because the colors get too gray. I think it's more that there tends to be a lack of contrast of values in the painting, and that can make things look sort of dull and lifeless, like there's not enough light shining on it, and thus the term muddiness. Okay, I need kind of a medium-sized brush here. What I want to do is get kind of the contour shapes that are running around the hand. On the back of the hand, there's this reddish color, and then it goes to a lighter pink. Okay. So I've got to come in with the color of the blouse to correct some of these shapes a little bit. Made that finger a little bit too fat, which is fine. Now there's enough room for the separation of the fingers there. Okay, and I think about 10 more minutes should do it. Just getting enough of this hand going so I can kind of sense what I'm doing here. So I just want to say quickly, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I highly encourage you to do so that you will get notifications. You also have to hit the notification bell for that to work, but so you get notifications of when I'm doing a new demo or posting a video. Occasionally I'll put up time-lapse videos or tutorials. And let's get the shape of that fingernail right. And so, like I said, yes, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. Not just deploy, I really do want you to subscribe. And also constantly putting up photos on Instagram, so occasionally videos, but mostly photos. Um, and so I encourage you to follow me over there too. Trying to get this one dark red where it's the essentially where the cuticle of the nail is. Trying to get that angle right. It's really stubborn, very hard to get these kind of angles in fingers. Just takes lots of drawing and drawing practice to get it. I think in a way, hands are harder to do than faces. Okay, starting to feel the anatomy a little bit more in the hand. the bone at the back of the wrist here, the turn of the form. Let's see if I can get this cast shadow from the thumb over on her finger. That'll help describe the form in space. Okay, so let's put a little bit more definition in her eyelashes here. Okay, I think that's in pretty good shape. I am going to call it a night. I think made some good progress here. It's about, I would say, about 50% done, even though most of there's paint over most of the whole thing, and content aware scale. Okay, um, and um, I'm going to continue to work on this. Maybe I'll take some photos as I go so you guys can continue to see it. I'm going to post a work in progress on my Etsy, on my Instagram site tonight, and then I'll post the finished version of it probably in about a week or so. And so thank you all for watching tonight, and I hope you all have a good night.